Most people think building workflows in N8N is just about connecting nodes, but in reality, that's just the easy part. What actually breaks your automation is everything around it. Say you have situations wherein your integrations don't trigger properly, or the workflows that you feel look perfect but fail in execution. And sometimes even a single bad data field can silently kill your entire flow. In this video, I am going to walk you through 3 of the most common mistakes people make while building N8N workflows using real examples. And more importantly, I'll show you how you can avoid them. First mistake that people often start with, or the first place where people get stuck, is the integrations. So let's start with that. Now this is where most non-technical users struggle. Now on the surface, N8N gives you ready nodes for multiple tools, multiple applications that you can directly integrate by simply logging in. But then there are tools where you require setting things up manually. Now let's quickly take an example wherein, say, I'm just building things from scratch, and first we'll see Slack as a platform to integrate. Now if you see, for every application there are two sets of workflows that we can create, or two sets of nodes that we can create. We have the trigger node and then we have an action node. Now say for example, if I want to use the trigger node, while having this setup, when I go to the credentials, or when I have to set up the credentials, the interesting thing over here is that over here I need to add the access token, I need to add the signature secret and other details as well. So what this particular trigger node requires is for us to set up a webhook. Now for a technical person, this will be very easy to set up, do that entire thing, set up webhooks and all of those things. But for a non-tech person, this becomes quite confusing as to how can this be found, where do I get these access data or signing secret keys from, right? And on the other hand, say for example, when I use another Slack node, that is, say, in terms of conducting any particular action, like say just sending a message, if I want to do that, then I'll just select on that and we'll quickly see how the credentials for that can be set. Now over here what happens is that when we are using any particular Slack node for action, then we can directly connect it while logging onto the platform itself. So that is how easy it is to work on it. But coming to the earlier step, that is the trigger. So for you to understand how to do this, what you can always do is you can go to the credentials and you can go for documents that are shared, the integration documents that are shared by N8N. Now here, as you can see, there are two types of integration that it allows. One is through the API access token, that's for the Slack trigger node. And then there is the OR2 that works for a normal Slack node, but not for the Slack trigger node. Now the interesting thing over here is this applies not just for Slack, but other tools as well. Like for example, if I'm talking about Zoho as a CRM platform, right? Or HubSpot as a platform. For action nodes, it's always going to be similar in terms of, say, direct sign in and doing it, because over there you're pushing data forward, not triggering it or not getting that data from anywhere. Now when I talk about, say, HubSpot, similar use cases where for actions it will directly ask you to simply log into your CRM and the integration gets done quickly within seconds. But for trigger node, what you need to do is you again have to go onto some other platform, set up the webhook and then get it done. Now majority of these platforms like Slack or HubSpot, what they have is their developer sections or developer tools through which you can add or create custom API keys. So that is what you need to understand. Okay? So this is the very first thing when it comes to, say, integrations. You need to understand that one, what sort of connection is required. Two, you need to test that trigger independently. And three is you need to validate the authentication and the permissions that are getting in. So this way you will be able to avoid getting stuck at this particular phase. Now the next mistake that is a bit less obvious, that is that good workflow design is not equal to good execution. See, just because your workflow looks clean does not mean it should run properly. What we are going to take over here as an example is an email automation workflow that we built time back. Now as you can see here, I'll just quickly take a second to explain how this workflow works. We have the data coming in from a source. We have the intro email that goes out. We have the status getting locked on a Google Sheet. Then we check for responses. If responses comes in, we have an AI agent that responds back to it. If not, we have the follow-up sequence that goes out. Now the interesting thing over here is that when we designed this particular workflow, we thought that since we are triggering it, the workflow will get executed throughout With the wait functions in place, we will be able to ensure that follow-ups are being sent on timely basis, the triggers are working properly. So say if, for example, my intro email is getting sent today, my follow-up will go tomorrow, and the next follow-up will go day after tomorrow. So that is what we thought of, and that is how this workflow was designed, and it does make sense. But what happens over here in N8N is, say for example, if this workflow gets triggered for one prospect, now it will keep on running for 3 days until the last follow-up goes out. But what is happening is a daily trigger is set. So if, for example, say I have one workflow that is already running, tomorrow another workflow gets triggered. So that means there is one duplication of those workflows getting executed. And second, this causes the workflow to stop and restart, eventually causing an error. So what we did over here is, instead of building it in a simple straight format, we worked around it by smartly layering the follow-ups. See, the objective over here was to understand that I want my intro emails to go out daily for the new prospects and the follow-up to go out daily for the older prospects. So what we did is we refined this workflow even further by having a scheduled trigger that runs every day in the morning. Then whatever data we get in, we have divided or added a status over here on the data that, say if it's an intro email, then it should be classified as a new data, and if it is a follow-up, then it should be classified as a contacted data. So on those basis, we have two branches that work. Now one important thing to note over here, the way N8N executes workflow is top to bottom. So the topmost workflow that gets executed first, and then the bottom workflows get executed. So in this case, whatever my new data is, the intro email goes to that, and whatever has been the old or contacted data, that goes in for follow-up. Now which follow-up to send, for that we have a switch in place that further bifurcates on sending follow-up 1, 2, 3 or 4, and we can even scale this as well. So this workflow is something that will get executed. It might look a bit complicated to understand in comparison to the earlier one, but this works well when it comes to execution, and that is what matters in the end. Now you might feel that, okay, this workflow is done, this is the second mistake that we have been saved from. Now we know that whenever we are designing a workflow, we need to take into consideration how and when the workflow gets triggered, and is it creating an overlap or not. Coming to the third one, the third mistake. Now this is something that is very, very less obvious, but something that is probably the most frustrating one as well. See, you have your workflow like this, just built completely clean. You have it functioning as well, you are executing as well. But what if a error comes in? Now, what are the chances of an error coming in over here? That is the first question that we would ask. So for one of our campaigns that we were doing, we had a recurring thing that we started. While we executed it for the very first time, we saw that there is an error that came in while sending the intro email itself. So as you can see, this is the error, that's a bad request, and it has highlighted that in the data on the 139th line, there is an issue. So what is the issue? For that, if you see the message that has been shared over here, you won't exactly understand what is the primary concern or primary issue over here, and that becomes tough for us to know that where do we fix the workflow. Eventually what we got to know is that the issue was in the email IDs that were there. So for a particular data entry like this, the email ID that was mentioned was incorrect. There was just a simple comma at the end of that email ID, and that is what broke the entire workflow. Now what happened over there is that for the data that was still, say, up to 18, the emails were sent, but the status and the thread ID wasn't updated, and for the rest the workflow failed. Now the task over here, or the challenge over here, is that if you fix this and then you restart this, and what's going to happen is that new set of emails will go out to the older ones as well. That is duplication and spamming. So how do we avoid this? So the most important thing, whenever you are setting a workflow and you're starting to execute it, prior to that, always and always have a look at the data that you're using. See that whether that particular data is validated as per the standardized fields that you have in place. Are they exactly correct or not? Even a small comma can break that entire workflow. So you need to understand what is the data that is flowing into your workflow. So this was about it. This is how you move from, say, just simple automation to reliable automation. And when I said that most people think that N8N is just about connecting nodes, the actual skill of being an N8N developer lies in terms of understanding how the integrations actually work, how the workflows behave over time, and how the data actually flows through your system. And if you get these three things right, you won't just build workflows, you'll build a system that can work at scale. So if you found this useful, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more such videos, and thank you so much for watching this one.